Hello and welcome, I'm Tim and this is TimBatSea. It's first thing in the morning and we've got a partially loaded bunker barge that has been over at our lay berth over at Port Newark. Port Newark is off to the left, Port Elizabeth is off to the right, and we're getting underway. But this is a special day. We have a trainee on board. And this is not a trainee as a deckhand, but a trainee, someone who's training to be in the wheelhouse. This particular trainee is his father works for the company here. His father's a really cool guy. Everybody loves his father. And he had worked for a few years on deck, got his licensing in order, and he has spent one hitch training with another captain. And now he's over on our boat training with us. And it's amazing. I'm always amazed at how there are some people that you really don't have to give them too much. It's just like it just makes sense to them. And, you know, I'm about to tell them, hey, you need to put this engine in this gear, you know, or you need to do this over that. And there are some people that before I can even tell them what to do, they're doing it. And then there are other people that really want the job and they really want to do well. Man, they struggle and have a tough time. Luckily, this is Mid-Atlantic waterman. Or anyway, I don't know if he's a waterman or not, but definitely has it in his genes. He's doing great. So he's running the boat right now. I'm standing there with him, and before we get underway, we call in on initial to VTS, or Vessel Traffic Services. We have to, all of our moves when we're with a loaded barge like this have to be controlled in New York. We call this New York Harbor. This is actually New Jersey over here, but we still refer to it as New York. And so if you want to know where we are, normally I give you a chart plotter and that sort of stuff, but this is a video from a little while ago, so kind of didn't have the chart plotter camera on this one. And it's kind of funny, I asked you in another video past there, I said, how do you guys like me putting in the chart plotter? And half of the people loved it and half the people hated it. So I don't know, it's a lot of work, but I think the way I may work this out in the future is that I'll try to give a chart briefing of what we're doing, and then keep the chart plotter working but not display it, so that I can shift to it, you know, and the camera will show it full screen when we need to. But we'll see how that goes. But anyway, to let you guys know, if you're not familiar with where Port Newark or Port Elizabeth is, directly in back of us, if we were turned around right now, we'd be looking at Newark International Airport. So picking up speed all the time here. Sun's coming up. It's a beautiful morning. Called in, like I say, we called in on initial, and when you go to channel 11 and you call in on initial and you say who you are, what barge you're picking up, it's, you know, particulars, whether it's loaded or light, and how you're made up to it, and where you are and where you're going, and then traffic will give you a preliminary thing of saying, okay, well, you should expect to see this guy here and this guy here and that guy there. And then we continue to do our thing to get ready, and when we get underway, then we switch over to channel 14 in this part of the harbor, which go to channel 12 in other parts of the harbor, but we switch to channel 14, and we will make a call saying, like, traffic, we are underway at this time, and then they'll give us an update of where anybody that's, traffic that might be a conflict for us, they'll point that out to us as we go. But anyway, we're coming along. You can see there's a ship here on the right, and these are really big ships, and You can see the barge that's tied up here looks like a little tinker toy, and it's a pretty good sized barge. It's over here. See, they still got their deck lights on because, like I say, the sun is just coming up. I think this was at the end of November, beginning of December, so I wonder how many of those containers have people's Christmas gifts in them. But this was a nice day. Unfortunately, our last few days in New York, it really blew a lot. And you'll see this later on, but I don't know what the future will hold, but right now they have sent us. We took a barge and we were headed from New York all the way to Houston, Texas. And we've made it as far as Jacksonville, Florida, and we've pulled in for weather. So we're letting a little bit of weather go by. Well, we're not doing anything here. I figured I'd put some video together for you guys. Hey, speaking of Jacksonville, Florida, of course, by the time you see this, I think I'll be well into my time off. If those that have been following the channel know that we usually work 2 weeks on or 2 weeks off, like the harbor boats do. But our particular boat, because we're usually an offshore boat, we do 3 weeks on and 3 weeks off. But every once in a while, every once a year, we have to rotate. We have to work an extra week. And then we have an extra week off, and that rotates the holidays. So in other words, last year we were on the boat, working for Christmas and New Year's. So this year we'll have Christmas and New Year's off. And in order to do that, we have to work 4 weeks straight, and then I'll have 4 weeks off. And so what's kind of cool about that is that on my other channel, I know most of you guys are watching this because you like tugboats, but I have another little microscopic channel called SV Paquita. I'll put a link in below for it. But anyway, Chrysalida and I sailed Paquita down in some horrible weather, and from Connecticut all the way down to Fort Lauderdale. And in just a few days, we'll be flying back there and picking up the boat. And when the weather's right, we'll run over to the Bahamas and spend 4 weeks in the Bahamas straight, and then go back to work. But anyway, passing somebody over here, and we would call this a one whistle pass. Some people still are wondering, say, what does it mean when you say I see you on the one? Well, it means a one whistle pass, or otherwise known as port to port. If we saw them on the other side, starboard to starboard, that would be a two whistle pass. One thing people kind of mess up is that sometimes it's hard to figure this out, but if we were going to overtake somebody and they were going the same direction, and I called them and I said, yeah, I'm going to come by you on one whistle, the person who's receiving that has to hear that I'm saying that from my perspective. So when I say, like, for example, I just told you that the guy that went by us on our left-hand side there, that was a port-to-port pass, that one whistle means I intend to see you on my port side. So if there was somebody right ahead of us and I was going to take them to the right of them, I would still be calling that a one whistle pass, because I would intend to see them on my port. So that would be my one whistle. Does that make sense? Anyway, that's something that is confusing for some people, and sometimes you'll hear some of us say, yep, one whistle, I'll see you on my port side, or I'll come down your starboard side. One of those things, just so there's no misunderstanding. But as you can see, when these ships are 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 feet long, and there's many of them in a line here, you get an idea of how big Port Elizabeth is. And we're coming out to the end of it, obviously, because it's first thing in the morning. We are eastbound right now, headed into the rising sun, and we'll start making this turn. And because this barge has a good load on it, I'll probably be telling the trainee that he has a lot of real estate ahead of him. He can't go all the way to the shore, but he can go about halfway there before he runs out of the channel. And so I think in this particular time I told him, I said, okay, you want to start coming right, you want to come right a little bit harder. And the reason why is, like, right now, if he put the rudder hard over, he can't hit the dock at this point. And the reason why is that when you have all that energy going, we're probably doing about 7 or 8 knots right now, and even if we got the barge to move 90 degrees to the right, there's so much energy going straight east right now, we would just keep going sideways. You know what I mean? It takes a while to cut in, so it's better when you have speed on like this that you just put a little bit of rudder input and get the turn moving early. They actually call that advance and transfer, and that's something that big ships do. They have actually these things called advance and transfer tables. We don't have them for tugboats, and it's for a good reason that we don't, and I'll get into that for a second. But for example, if you have a ship and it will tell you that if your ship is going this fast and you need to make this turn, how much rudder you need to put, you'll advance this far ahead before it starts turning this many degrees to whatever the direction to do. And they call that an advance and transfer. And the reason why we don't really do that with tugboats is, first of all, we don't have the tables. And the reason why we don't have the tables to look that up is that would change whether we have a barge or we're light, or if we have a barge, is the barge light or is the barge loaded? Are we in push gear? Are we alongside? Are we towing? Every one of those you'd have to have another, yeah. So every one of those would need a different advance and transfer table, and they don't do that. So it's funny. There was a bridge resource management class, and the person that was teaching it was from a ship background or Navy background. And they were insistent that in our voyage plans we used advance and transfer tables to say at what time and where in our voyage we'd start making all these turns. And we were trying to explain that it doesn't work that way in tugboats. Couldn't understand that. And so what I keep saying is that we are not robots. You know, there's a reason why you'll have a Navy ship that might have 2,000 people that run the ship, and then you'll have a merchant ship that'll be 3 times the size of the Navy ship that has 17 or 23 people running the ship. We have to do all this stuff. We don't have these tables. We have to do this calculation in our heads and figure out when to turn. And some people might think that's a little archaic, but that's the way it works, and it's because there's too many variables, because we change so much, as opposed to if you were running a Navy ship, it's probably going to be at the same pretty much the same draft most of the time, where our barge might be loaded down to just a few feet when it's empty, or 20 feet when it's loaded. So that's a 20-foot difference. Anyway, I think I've talked about this. Or I made a post about this on Instagram. And by the way, if you want to follow in real time, come on over and follow TimBatSea on Instagram, and you can see some of the stuff. But this ship over here has these crazy looking cranes, and what they are is, a while ago, you see the bridge that's all the way over there on the left hand side? That's the Bayonne Bridge, and they had this amazing piece of engineering where they lifted they had to make the bridge higher to get these super big ships in, because the ships were too tall. So instead of building a new bridge, they actually kept the structure of the bridge there and raised the deck of the bridge up. Well, when they did that, they still couldn't bring in the biggest ships around. And it's funny because we'll have all these news stories about, the biggest ship to ever come into America is over here. It's still not the biggest ships. Like I say, there's some ships that are much bigger that will never be able to come into the U.S. And it's not because we don't have the draft to take them. It's because that we don't have the infrastructure as far as the ports go. And that's what these cranes, I believe, are doing right now, is looking at them. You can see they're on a ship they probably come, I don't know if they've come from China. My guess would either be China, because China makes a lot of that stuff, but also South Korea makes a lot of that stuff too. But these cranes came over, and you can see these other ones where they're all up in the air. They're not going to ship them like that. So that whole gantry system, not only the arm that sticks up, but where the box is, where all the you know, the cranes are, the machinery, that's all lowered down onto the deck. And the new ones, these new cranes, are much taller, because it's not so much that you have to just have a taller one to get over on these ships that are loaded higher, but you also have to have them so that you can reach all the way out to the other side of it. I mean, some of these big container ships are well over 100 feet wide, so the container cranes have to go out past that, you know, so that they can drop their thing down and pick up the last container all the way out. And so I think that this is part of the modernization of the port. Anyway, now we are in a southerly direction here, where we were east before, and we are coming down. This is actually what we call Newark Bay. Oddly enough, there's usually all kinds of ships at the end here, but there's nobody here. And then we're going to turn this last crane that's right there. We're going to end up turning in there and going alongside the ship that is in there. Now the thing, this is oh goodness, I'm beating myself up for not having this on a chart. But when we turn this corner, it's going to look like there's a mile of water all around, and there is, but most of the water over there is only a couple feet deep. So where we're turning, there's a defined channel, and it's just about big enough for the tug in the barge. So if and you know, this is one of the things I was trying to teach our trainee, that if we had to turn around and go port side to the ship, we wouldn't want to back all the way down there, because that's kind of very difficult to do. What we'd probably do is drive up to the ship and then rotate counterclockwise and do what we call putting the wheels to the ship. And when we do that, it's because if the barge is light, or if it's lighter, it'll be lightest in the bow, we can swing the bow over the area that might, I don't want to say it's not going to go aground. I'm just saying that you reduce your odds of anything happening really badly if you swing your bow around to the area that you're not sure of, as opposed to swinging the propellers and your propulsion and steering through the part that you wouldn't want to mess up. So that would be a conversation that we'd be having right here. Now I'm trying to explain that we want to keep our, we want to do this balancing act of keeping our speed up so that we can steer, because if he's got to take the energy out of the barge, if we're doing 8 knots, he's got to get this thing slowed down. But if he pulls the throttles back and then turns the wheels, turns the rudder, he's not going to steer too well. You need the propellers pushing water by the rudders to really make it stick. Now granted, if we're doing 8 knots, there's going to be enough water in there to turn the barge. It's just not going to be anything like it would be if you were in gear. So I'm telling him, look, if you don't make your turn quick enough, you're going to fall too far off the ship. You're going to see that the ship is at a 90 degree. You'll figure it out. But I'm trying to explain to him. In other videos, I've talked about what we call the predictor line, but officially it's called the vector line. That right now it looks like we're aiming really well, but our vector line is probably going out at about a 45 degree angle from us. So we're really moving from right to left. So you can see there's the ship up there, and I'm telling him that he wants to be as close to that as he can, because he's got all that lateral movement pulling him from right to left, and by the time he gets down to the ship, he's going to be far off of it. So now once he gets over there and he gets it, as close to the ship as he can start bleeding off speed and trying to get this thing slowed down. The good news is that it's a big ship and we've got plenty of time. And the really good news is that there isn't any current or wind that's going to mess us up. Usually when we get over like this, we get alongside a barge and we have to wait for somebody to come and catch a line from us. And it's a real struggle to stay there. If I remember correctly, I think this particular one, it was a real anomaly. We were able to stay right there for quite a while. You know, one thing I didn't... Here I am, running my jaws trying to keep the video interesting. I didn't tell you that I had sped the video up. I think I sped it up 5 times there, so that when we were going up the, when we were coming around the corner there, up until the time we got about here, that we were going 5 times as fast as normal, just to try to keep this video a little shorter than it really took us the time to get over there. Okay, so right now, we are experiencing exactly what I was talking about. We're not in any danger. We're not going to run out of room as far as water goes on the left-hand side. But he's going to have to come in and what I call stabbing at the ship at an angle here. Instead of going down parallel with the ship, he's got to come over here and start making up for all that lateral motion, because even though he was pointed right, the lateral motion kept pulling him off to the left. And so now that predictor line is probably going straight ahead, and we know that the connection where they're going to connect to their fuel, or where we're going to pump fuel to them, is all the way going to be back in the engineering section. So because the thing that, especially with newer people, like a trainee like this, we really have them take a look at the rake. And the rake here is a good example. You see the bow here? You can see where there's a flat section. See the first M that we see here, it says HMM, that M, and it's flat for a while, and then you can see where it goes up, and the bow, the rake starts curling in. If he got in underneath that rake, that's something that can really get you. And it's not just in the bow, but in the stern as well. They have a rake on either side, and they don't do that to mess up bunker barges. They do that because of the hydrodynamics. When they're going forward, instead of having a blunt bow go through the waves, it makes sense to have it flared like that. And then they do the same in the stern, because everyone says, oh, fair wind and a following sea. Well, a following sea can be pretty deadly if you have a flat stern, but if you have a rake where the stern lifts up out of water like that, you not only will provide more room for your propeller and your rudder, but you'll also provide for the water, and it makes it much more efficient. If the water that was underneath that you're displacing came out and went to a solid, it was just cut off straight, it would be very inefficient. So if the water can come in what they call laminar flow, where it'll stay alongside the hull and then slowly work its way up the rake, the hull shape becomes much more efficient. And if you have a following sea, the following sea will roll in on the stern just as a head sea will be cut by the bow. So that kind of works that way. So right now, my trainee has done a great job bleeding off the speed. We're getting in there. We're making sure that the fenders are down. We call them the Yokohamas. And he's bringing it in. He's trying to get everything settled down, slowed down, moved over all the time. I keep thinking that everybody knows this, but that we have a lot of new people, so it's kind of important to keep saying these things. Unlike a car, when you turn the wheel, we don't actually have a steering wheel, we have a jog lever that we use. But when you put your rudder hard over one way, the bow does not move over. What happens is you're really moving the stern. So it has an apparent angle making it look like the bow comes over. But when you drive a car, your front wheels turn, and the front of your car, in this case, if you wanted to get closer to the ship, you would turn to the right, and the bow would come right over. But that doesn't happen here. If he puts the rudder hard over to the right now, the bow's going to stay where it is, and the stern is going to go to the left. And but by doing that, if we keep making forward progress, the angle will be such that we'll get closer and closer to the ship. And anyone who's ever driven a forklift or anything that steers from the stern will understand that. Steers from the back will understand that. I apologize to the longtime viewers of the channel. Thank you guys so much. There's a whole crew of you guys that have been with me since day one. I really appreciate it. You guys have heard me say the same thing over 1,000 times. I can't believe you guys are still with me all this time, but thank you so much. So, a little bit further up here, we're going to get here, and we're slowing down, and I'm trying to teach the trainee something that I have trouble learning myself, and that's patience. In this particular, I see, we knew that this ship, the reason why we were watching this ship come into the harbor here and get tied up. We didn't start heading its way until its assist tugs had left. And so I'm telling the trainee that you can go flying up, get right on spot, but the people on the ship have to go through customs and immigration and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to take a little while before there's any manpower out here to catch anything from us anyway. And like I say, 9 out of 10 times when you try to get alongside a ship like this, something will be pulling you off. The example I use is anyone that's ever been camping probably is familiar with the curse of I think it's the camping curse. It doesn't matter which side of the fire you sit at, the smoke will always seem to blow right at you. If smoke is blowing at you, you get up and you move to the other side of the fire so that it's blowing away from you. No, the wind blows it right back in your face. Well, it seems like every time you try to get to a ship, if you go all stop, you just fall off the ship. And then if you're trying to sail away from a ship, if you go all stop, the wind will hold you right tight to the ship. Anyway, fortunately for us, and especially fortunately for the trainee, we were really lucky in this particular instance where we were able to get it here. And I'm trying to explain to him that as you approach where you want to be, you want to use as little inputs with the engine, like just clutch in, clutch out, clutch in, clutch out, if anything, and then use as little rudder as possible. Because if you can get the whole thing settled down, the odds of it falling off the ship become less. I know that sounds strange, but it just seems to work that way. Anyway, he's got it stalled out right here, and everything's good. And after a while, I think it's going to be coming up here in about a minute or so. But I actually speed things up, and instead of doing it 5 times, I think I do it by 10 or 11 times too, so that we were here for about 45 minutes or something like that, and waiting for people to come, and luckily it was just hanging there. And sometimes you have something called a Panama chock, which is a chock that is recessed into the hull of the ship, and so in other words, it doesn't stick out of the ship. The ship can slide down, a dock or the gates of the Panama Canal or anything like that, and it won't get caught on there. But what's nice about it is instead of it being 25 or 30 feet up where the ship is, where the other bits are on the ship, it might be low enough that the guys on deck can grab it, or not really grab it. They can either lasso it, or sometimes they use a boat hook to place a line on it. And some ships have them, and some ships don't. I don't think that was an option right here, but we're sitting here, and it's just staying, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe our luck right now. It's a beautiful day. We're not working real hard to stay alongside the ship. Everything's fine. And like I say, in any second now, you'll see I'm going to speed things up a little bit to save about 35 or 45 minutes, I think, while we're waiting for somebody to show up. Watching paint dry. Taking forever. Maybe I should have sped this part up too. I think it's going to go right about now is my guess. There it goes. All right. So that's like 10 or 11 sped. Oh, look at him go. Excuse me. So the thing that is interesting about this is that when you speed stuff up like this and you're trying to work to stay alongside, it really makes everything look really bumpy because all the movements are accentuated, and that's not really happening here because we got really lucky where the wind or the tide or whatever is just pressing us up against the ship, and everybody's happy. You can see the tankerman and the deckhand have gone into the office to stay warm. It's a nice, beautiful day, but still being in the Northeast, it's still pretty cold. Excuse me. So while we're waiting for the deck crew to come, let me keep reminding you about my other channel there. We had this horrible trip sailing down, and I did something really stupid. Instead of going the way that we always go with the tugboat, and that we've gone 4 different times back and forth to Florida from New England, and I always go the same way that I've been going for my whole career in tugboating, but I decided to go with what Predict Wind said. They're supposed to have the boat pullers for what I had and all that, and oh, that was a big mistake, and boy, didn't we take a beating. But anyway, oh, look at that. Now we got somebody on deck. Look at that. So this is something that happens all the time. You wait, and when somebody finally shows up, they come over and they start yelling and screaming. But it's like you would think it's the same thing no matter where they go. In any port, in any country, they always come and they always yell, and then they always have to go find a heaving line and find a crew to heave up the lines, because obviously it's so far. I mean, they're going to throw a heaving line down, but they're going to haul our lines up, and it's like I say, it's quite a distance to get it up there. Some of the ships actually have capstans, little winches that will they wrap the heaving line around to pull things up. So just because somebody shows up, we're like getting all excited that they're there, but then they still have to go, and they still have to go get a heaving line, and they still have to get a crew to come over and help them. Oh, and you've been sitting here for 45 minutes or an hour, you're kind of like, well, you're not quite as understanding as you might be another time. Speeding this up as well. Oh, yep, there you go. Not paying attention. Looks like they're working on a bow line right there. And in a case like this, sometimes you want to put a bow line up first, sometimes you want to put a stern line up first. When we've been sitting up here without any lines, I'll probably be telling the guys, say, what line do you want to catch first? I'm like, whatever line you want, because we're sitting here just fine. So they'll put a couple up there, and hopefully it looks like we're moving forward right now. So they'll put a line up, and that may be, sometimes the bow line, we have to go up forward so they can get the line up there, and then once they get it up there, then we back down on the line, and then put another line up. And ideally you want to get something around a third of the way back to a midship that you can work in on. And that means that it will leave one engine in clutch, and we'll be working, and clutch will be minimal slow ahead on one engine, and it will press into that line. The tankerman will tell you that you're what we call on spot, meaning that you're where you need to be, because he's going to use his crane and lift up the hose and do all that sort of stuff. You can see on the ship there's a little crane over there, and that's just this side of the life raft there, and the lifeboat, and that's where his hose is going to end up being, when he lifts everything up. It's kind of funny too. I would love to report to you that it's all tankermen are the same, and boy, that isn't the case at all. And I suppose tankermen will tell you that working with different tug crews, we all should be the same, and that's not the case for them either. So I suppose that's not such a big surprise when you start thinking of it that way. But There are some tankermen that it's not so much on a ship as it is you see it at a dock. And they say, okay, we need to come 3 foot ahead. We come 3 foot ahead. Okay, we got to go 2 foot back. Now we got to get 1 foot ahead, and then 1 foot back. I'm like, man, you got like 100 feet of rubber hose there. What is the issue? But I don't understand it. Then you work with other guys, and other guys, we put out a line, and they stop you, and there's never any adjustment at all. Like, they know exactly what to do. A couple videos ago, you guys heard me talking about my friend Paul. Paul is awesome. He one of the things that he does really, really well is he must have a book. I know some tankermen writes. They have like a secret book, and every ship they do, because it seems kind of weird, but if you do this for a living, you start bunkering the same ships over and over again. Like if you bunker this ship, it's very possible that in 2 months' time you're going to see this ship again. You know, it'll gone overseas and come back again. Anyway, they will write notes on every ship. So a really good tankerman, a guy like Paul, a guy like Gordon, these people, I'll call them up and say, hey, what do you want to do with the ship? They're like, oh, it's got to go this way. It's got to be over here. We're going to be hanging out this way, and we'll catch a first line over here. And those guys are really, really good. And you might say, well, geez, Tim, you ought to do that too. And yeah, I really ought to. The only thing is that a tankerman only has to know that about his barge and all the different ships. I would have to know that about all the different ships and all the different barges that we have. So that's all the same. It is not the same. Some barges have their manifolds in the center. Some are more further back. Some only load or discharge on one side. So everything's all different. When you have a really good tankerman, it makes our job much, much easier. Especially because there are so many things that are out of our control, like waiting for the crew on the ship. You know, when they show up. What they have, and I've talked about this before too. That the guys in the wheelhouse licensed guys have to be proficient in English because English is the international maritime language. But that doesn't apply to the engineers. And when we come alongside to bunker a ship, we don't really deal with the guys in the wheelhouse. It's usually just the engineers. And so there can be a whole bunch of language and cultural barriers. Remember that. I don't know. I should have a tankerman. Well, actually, you know, Paul watches these videos. So, Paul, if you're in here, if you see this thing, make sure that you comment so everybody can see what you're doing here. But my guess is that if you had to bunker 100 ships, I would be surprised if you had more than one out of 100 that was a U.S. flagship with a U.S. crew. I could be way off on that, so but the tankerman would know. So if you're a tankerman out there, please comment. But anyway, and so for people that aren't familiar with how this works, they call this a flag of convenience. So some people say, oh, well, look, that ship's from Panama because it says Panama on the back, or it says Liberia or Monrovia. Well, that's probably not the case. It definitely wasn't built there, and there probably aren't any Monrovians or Panamanians that are even working on that ship. What it is they've registered the ship there for tax and compliance issues. So in other words, the International Maritime Organization, the IMO that regulates all this type of shipping, just recently they raised their minimum day rate for an IMO. The minimum wage is now, I believe it's $22.50 a day, and so obviously that you couldn't do that in the U.S. Nobody could live on $22 a day, let alone no one would want to work for that. But in other developing nations, that's a very good salary. So they do different things. And so if you have a U.S. ship, you have, and it would be what we call a Jones Act ship at that point, it would have to have a U.S. crew. And that might be much more expensive, and you might have to have not just the crew, and the boat might not have to just adhere to IMO standards, but you would have to adhere to standards for the country that you register it in, whatever those might be. And in the case of pollution and things like asbestos and stuff like that, all those different work-related regulations are probably a little bit more stringent in the U.S. than they would be in Liberia or Monrovia. So, but I think the biggest, I think that's a big issue, but I think the biggest one, and you know what, Dr. Sal, I really should have asked him about this one. I think the biggest driving factor is the taxes that ship owners or shipping companies pay. They have to pay it to where they are flagged. And one thing that Sal had taught me about is what they call port state control. So in other words, if you have a Liberian ship and you want to come into the U.S., you can come into the U.S., but port state control would empower people like the Coast Guard to say this ship is not worthy of sailing. It's not. We think it's unsafe to leave or to be around here. And you say, well, you can't tell me what to do because I'm not an American ship. Well, actually, because of port state control, they can do that. And it's not the United States. It's every port that you go into has the power of port state control. I think I have that right. Anyway, if you wonder who Dr. Sal is, Sal Macliano is he was a merchant mariner for a long time. He met his wife at sea, and he runs an amazing YouTube channel called What's Going On with Shipping, and he's a really cool guy. He's also a professor, and he got his doctorate in maritime shipping as a historian, I believe. And his YouTube channel is amazing. He's a great guy. He's actually been on our channel before. Anyway. Excuse me. Oh, goodness. I think I've been talking here for 40 minutes. I'm shut up. I always giggle when I go through. Excuse me. I don't know what's down here in Florida. I think my allergies are catching up with me. But I always go through all the comments that you guys comment about, and it's funny, we'll have all these comments, and 99% of you guys are the nicest comments, and there's always some guys, there'll always be some troll out there be blah 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 blah, you won't shut up. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you're absolutely right, but I think if I thought that about a channel I didn't like, I probably wouldn't take the time to type in a comment like that. But anyway, go ahead, helping the algorithm out, so that's good with me. Anyway, so you see the guys, they're working their way aft. You can see here's the guys lowering down the heaving line, and they can't just throw it over. What they do is they'll put it through a chalk. If they're a chalk is like a round circle that when they bring our line up, it'll have to, they don't want to pull it over the rail, they want to pull it through the chalk before they put it on the bits. So they can get together, take the heaving line over there, put it on the line, then the crew on the ship will start heaving it up. So I was saying, it's funny because I don't think I'm giving too much away here. I'm telling you a little secret, but I think that only a very small percent of you guys made it this far in this boring video. But yeah, so when we report for duty, we get different orders, and depending on those orders, we do whatever the orders tell us to do. And for, I don't know, almost a year now since we've come out of Puerto Rico, we've mostly been working, doing jobs in and around New York City. And it looks like we've just picked up a contract that we're not really sure too much about the contract, just because they don't seem to tell us too much about it. We just kind of, they tell us to go, and we're supposed to head to Houston. And like I say, we got as far as Jacksonville, and we're just waiting out some weather right now. And then pretty soon I'll crew change in a couple days, and I'll be back in a month. But I don't know if that means we're going to be doing a lot of work down in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not really sure. But anyway, I am trying to make this more and more happy. I keep promising better videos, but then I run out of content. I shot two of the most technical, difficult jobs I've ever done, and I'm so proud of them, and I just couldn't wait to put it. I had all three cameras running, and the main camera that tells the whole story, I had both those jobs on the same SD card, and the SD card got corrupted, and I had to reformat it, and I lost everything. So I tried to salvage the videos by just showing, but I mean, I can't talk you through a video with you just watching a little chart plotter. And then like the 360 camera, I put it lower on the first house, not the upper house, just to try to see if I could get a better angle, and that didn't work either. But anyway, yeah, no, I wanted to cry after that. Like I say, they were the greatest thing, but I am trying to continue to work to get these better. So thank you guys so much. Just about at the end of the video here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, we'd love to have you on our Patreon page. Patrons get ad-free content and early too. And you guys take care, be safe, and as always, I'll see you on the one.